So defensively, most of like the front seven starting wise doesn't play. Dorrance Armstrong, Frankie Louvu, kind of the exceptions there. You have the starting back end. But I thought one thing that was interesting just as a starting point here, Logan, is, Louvu kind of plays that main linebacker role, which I thought was interesting because if this was a real game and Bobby Wagner was for some reason unavailable, like that's what I think they would do. Obviously, especially without Jordan McGee available, and we're hoping to find out on Monday from Dan Quinn what McGee's status is moving forward. But I thought that was interesting that one of their best players is actually out there when they rest so many of the others, and he's in there kind of in a role where it's not expected for him to be. Because I'd imagine if there's one linebacker on the field, sometimes that will be Wagner more than Louvu. I guess it depends on the package. I don't know. What'd you make of Louvu being out there and his usage?
I mean, I think Luvu's the guy. You know what I mean? I think Bobby Wagner obviously is Hall of Fame kind of guy, but I think in terms of playmaker right now in their careers, I think Luvu's probably the guy they want on the field more, because he can rush, he can line up as the Sam, he can line up as the Will, he can be on the ball, he can be off the ball, he's a great blitzer, he's super physical. I think he's just more of a dynamic playmaker. And again, that's not a knock on Bobby. It's just like, he's, what is he, 32, 33, whatever he is. So like it's just different. And I think that's kind of the way, just in terms of the way he's been used at practice, that's what I would expect too. And again, it's hard to know what their actual usage plan with Bobby is because he's taking vet days. He's, practicing the joint practice. He's not doing this. Like he's on a different workload, which is totally, to be expected. So when they're both healthy, when they're both out there, I think it can still change. But I think as of right now, I think you probably prefer Louvu just because of his play style. But we'll see, maybe, and again, like for the majority of the starting defensive reps, so it was about 12 plays, 15 plays, something like that. They had two linebackers on the field, right? The other guy was, I'm going to butcher his name, number 32, Malik. Is that his name?
Michael Walker.
Michael Walker. Yeah, I think he's a heck of a player, man. He had an excellent
He played
game.
a lot too. He was in there the entire that dude had to keep his pads on at halftime. He played like 40, I think it was 49 snaps.
Yeah, he played absolutely insane. But I do think like if you're looking at linebacker usage, like they had two linebackers on the field the entire time the first defense was out there. And then the nickel player was Mike Sanderstill, And so I think that's probably, I would expect something very, very similar, but instead of Michael, you get Bobby Wagner. So I think like that's kind of the usage, and the guy you want on the line of scrimmage, the guy you want blitzing is probably Louvu, and the guy in the more traditional linebacker role is probably Bobby, is what I would say looking at that.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the linebackers, obviously on the pod where we predict who's going to make the team, but I do think Anthony Pittman had a couple of rough plays, including the penalty, which is a vet. You're like, dude, come on. And the linebacker numbers are going to be interesting. The fact that Walker was out there first, I know they play slightly different positions, but like that was something that definitely caught my eye, and we'll talk more about it on Thursday. As far as the starters go, obviously St. Juste gives up the touchdown, and there's another big play down the sideline later in the third quarter, about 4 minutes left, Logan. And B. Mitch talked about on the broadcast, like the technique there in terms of playing through the hands and making sure that you get there in time. And I'm just kind of curious what you've seen, because you've talked about that on the show before too, of the way that they teach it and playing through the hands. Is this just... Are those good throws that you just sometimes, hey, there's not a whole lot you can do, you get beat? Is that, hey, they're still adjusting the technique, or was there a mistake made earlier in the down that perhaps got them a half step behind, and that's the difference in the NFL? Like, what do you make specifically of the St. Juste play, but it's almost a carbon copy in a different part of the field on that play? I think it was Woods on the bad end of that in the third quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think with let's start with St. Juste. The only thing I would say, because I actually thought he was in pretty good relationship to the receiver, and I know people are going to be like, "Oh, don't defend him. Oh, he's trash or whatever." But he's in good position. He played a pretty good game. You know what I'm saying? And as an offensive player, I say that's like one of the better throws I've seen on a fade in a long time. Like it's not this big looping arc. It's like up and down. It's on the part. It's in the bucket. Like the receiver has laid hands. Like that ball is in a really good spot. The only thing I would say, and this is something you'd have to talk to Joe Witt Jr. about and the defensive backs coach, is like I feel like I would like him to get hands on the receiver earlier in the down. because then it just disrupts it later. And I think St. Juste does a great job with the short area quickness. He does a great job on the turn. He's in good relationship. Like, he's less than an arm's length away. And I think one way to help yourself out there would be to kind of press. And they've been working on that a little bit more. But again, I don't know based on the defensive call if that's what they're exactly looking for or if he's comfortable with that technique yet. So on that one, I say it's a good throw. Like, it's probably the best throw I've seen on that. Like, I think a good juxtaposition is the Driscoll to Tinsley throw later and for our offense, right? Where he feels a little bit late on the throw. It's a double move, so the timing's a little bit different. Feels a little bit late. There's a little bit more air, and the DB's able to rally, recover, and play through the hands to break it up. Like, I think if you get a ball like that, I think St. Juste easily breaks it up and probably could even make a play on the ball. But that's not the throw you got. You got a throw from a guy in Tua Tagovailoa who's got paid a lot of money and showed, to my estimation, like, I didn't know he had that in the bag, that kind of throw. So is definitely playing some good football and delivered an excellent ball. So I think, again, like, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for him, but I think that's a pretty challenging spot to be in a DB. The only thing I would question, and again, I don't have any insight on this, I'd have to talk to the defensive staff, is do you want him to be more physical early in the down? Because that would disrupt that throw later. You know what I'm saying? It would disrupt the receiver, disrupt the timing, because Tua's throwing that essentially off a quick game. Like, it's from the gun, so it's like
1-2 out.
Yeah,
it's a timing throw.
And so, like, it's a quick game-ish concept to the left. So I think it is a quick game setup, right? And I think with that press coverage on the outside, he probably had a hitch called because I think it was 4th and 1. Probably had a hitch called versus press or versus him within 3 yards of the cushion. You're going to convert that to a fade. I think that's exactly what you got. And again, I don't think St. Juste is in a bad spot. I think that throw is just tremendous. So,
yeah. And I think I'd be so curious to ask Joe Witt, be like, all right, good spot versus optimal spot. Like, can you be, because if you get that extra half step, are you into his body? Can you drive him out of bounds a little bit? Can you potentially, if you realize what's happening, get your head around and make a play on the ball versus just trying to play through the hands because you're in trail. But again, like, if that's the coaching point, of to be in trail and to be right on that back hip and then play through the hands, then maybe it's just a matter of execution. But that's a question for Joe Witt Jr. and Juice and that staff. So I just thought it was interesting because, Brian talked about it on the telecast. I know we've talked about it before, being occasionally late playing through the hands. Yeah. But that does seem to be a case where just, hey, good job, Tua, handshake, congratulations on a heck of a throw. All right. Let's see. What else do we got? The other big, I think, talking point defensively is obviously Jamin has the play late in the game. Yeah. And I had made a note, as I'm watching, like, Jamin rush plan, we got to talk about it because, for some of the first snaps that he gets there, I feel like some of the traits started to show up. Yeah. Where he is explosive off the ball. And like Jamin talked about this week, some of the tips and tricks that some of the coaches have given him to try to unlock the reasons why he's being asked to do this in the first place. That explosive nature, being able to use his length, use his size, use his twitchiness. And yet he would just launch himself right into the middle of the offensive tackle. And you're like, that's what they want, not what you want. And then all of a sudden, boom! He has I think a good move on the play before the sack and forced fumble, and then all of a sudden he hits with a boom, like inside move, gets to the quarterback, and eureka! It's there. He shows some other great, it's like a swipe move later in the game where he's able to get the corner, and all of a sudden, here we are a month into this experiment, Logan, and some things are starting to come together. What'd you make of Jamin's day and kind of where we are in the progression for him to be, a defensive end in the NFL?
Yeah, I'm really happy for Jamin. I mean, he just, like, this is a tough thing to do. We've talked about it. I've been very open about my reservations about him making the switch, and he seems to have just handled it extremely well. And I think the fact that you see him showing up, like, he has a PBU on a keeper, like where the quarterback's rolling out, he reads out of it and his speed to get there. The play before, it's a keeper. He runs the guy down at the sideline. Like, he's just doing a good job, like, hustling. And I think that's the thing, is like, good things come to those who run, and he's been running the football. And I think as you become better in terms of your pursuit, in terms of your angles, which he's done a great job with, it buys you time as a rusher. It buys you time. And so, even on the sack force fumble, if I'm coaching him, I'm like, I don't really love your angle here. I don't really love kind of your get off, but you make it work because you're a good athlete. So I just think, like, even though that's not the most polished rush I've ever seen, like, because he's athletic and he's starting to get that feel you're describing, he's able to get some production on a sack. And that's Patrick Paul. Like, that's a guy that I had a pretty high grade on coming out of the draft, and he played really well in the first preseason game. He played really well outside of that one snap. So I think like that guy's going to be an NFL tackle at some point. He's going to be starting for Miami probably next year, when Armstrong retires. So like, that's not like just some slouch guy who's not playing football anymore, right? So I think there's a lot of really positive things to this progression. It's nice to see the production starting to come with it. And I think production breeds confidence. And I think there's a significant chance, like a legitimate opportunity, like real, that he's on the team. And maybe midway through the season, if he keeps progressing the way he's progressing, like contributing as a pass rusher in those situations that Dan alluded to, the 2-minute and third and long situations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the question too, right? Like, I think at this point, we both would change our tune on whether or not he's making this team from where we were, 2-3 weeks ago, where it's like, man, the numbers really, all due respect to Jamin, the numbers are not good. But I think at this point, like, he's so committed to it and they're committed to him that he's going to be on the team. And then the question becomes, like, on game day, is he one of the inactive guys? Or is he a guy that they're like, no, we trust you from week one, even if we know you're not close to where we hope you can get to? Because I think they're not just hoping that he can like pass as a whatever. Like, they're hoping that, he's with the athlete that he is, that he can be really good at this. But that's going to take time. That's going to take reps. It's going to take, and especially at a position where if he's only playing a limited number, like, those reps are going to be hard to come by because he's not playing snap in, snap out. But at the same time, there's only so many of those dudes that you have, and you want to rotate your guys on game day. So is he inactive or is he active? And if he's active, he's playing, and not just on special teams. So that's going to be interesting to watch. But I think what we've seen so far is pretty good. And that, if he's out there playing some on game days, like, you're not dead in the water with Jamin Davis. And I think, the athleticism puts a floor underneath him too, that you see it on the play right before the sack. And I'm glad you brought that one up. The change of direction and like pursuit ability he has means that, and his willingness to do the work, to run, to hustle. Like, okay, it's a naked bootleg to your side. You get caught a little bit inside, pivot and chase a guy down, and you force an incompletion. If that happens in a game, like, that's an excellent outcome. Yeah. And so his ability and willingness to just make himself as right as humanly possible, even if it's not pretty, even if it's not ideal, as he continues to bank these reps, I think gives him a floor that makes him playable. And so I'm excited to see what it is. And I don't think that we would have said that a month ago. I think we were both scared for him a little bit a month ago. And it speaks really well to him of how quickly he's made this transition to a level that feels playable in an NFL regular season game, even if it's not close to optimal yet.
Yeah, and it's also kudos to the coaching staff, because like, that's tough to do, man. It's tough to take a guy who's like playing linebacker, move to defensive end, and then for him to be like, I'm going to say struggle with the transition early on, but you trust your evaluation, trust what you see, trust your coaches, trust Ryan, trust Daryl Tapp, and this is the result. I mean, it's pretty impressive, and again, like, the change over the last 3 weeks specifically has been very drastic, and I just think, man, in 3 more weeks, if he makes the team and he's playing, like, what's it going to look like? Like, is he going to be able to be that guy that comes in? You're like, this is a very lofty comparison, but like your Bryce Huff pass rush specialist, right? That can give you some consistent pass rush juice, and then also kind of spell guys on first and second down. Like, it's a really interesting thing all of a sudden at that position. And I'm really excited for him, really happy for him that he was able to get that play. And you should I was standing right next to the bench when he got the sack, and they just were ecstatic for him. And it just shows you, I think, how he's respected and how they appreciate the transition on the team, but also like the just change in culture and the love and support that this team has for each other is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, I just think that this whole culture and atmosphere, that's, we can close with this too. I don't know if you saw Dan's presser, but he was asked about, talking to Kaz Allen and talking to Riley Patterson after their mistakes, the fumble for Kaz, which we'll talk more about Allen's spot on this roster, obviously, on Thursday. Riley Patterson, the kicker, has 2 misses. And you can see on the telecast, Dan talking to him and being productive because he knows at the very least he needs him for the rest of this game. And I think especially in Kaz's case, all due respect to Riley Patterson, like this is a guy that they hope to develop into a weapon for them over the long term, even if it takes a couple of years of him being on the practice squad. And so I think that the toughness is not, just yelling at dudes, wagging their finger or your finger in their face and looking tough because you're being hard on them. It's giving people the tools to succeed. And Dan talked about that in the post-game press conference of, hey, if we're going to ask you to do something, we're going to give you the tools to be correct. And so for Riley, it's, hey, was I a little too close on my approach? For Kaz, it was the ball tucked, in the right spot. Did I have the right pressure on the ball? Like we're gonna figure out why the mistake happened and we're gonna correct it. And that is by definition, according to actually a book I'm reading right now called Do Hard Things. The definition of toughness is understanding, like challenging people, but giving them the tools to succeed. And Dan is as exceptional as any coach that I've covered in understanding that and doing that. You've obviously experienced that as a player, but I think it then creates this atmosphere that is good for everybody and is supportive. And there's a camaraderie and we're in this together. We're going to figure out our problems. And I think especially in a year where they could lose a decent number of games because they're in year one of a rebuild. And if we're realistic, that could be on the table for them. They could do a lot better, but we'll see. Having that kind of atmosphere is really, really important. And Dan's ability to, in a spring and the first part of this training camp in the summer, establish that is impressive to me.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, he's the first guy that talks to Kaz Allen, after the fumble. He's the first guy that talks to him after his first carry after the fumble, just to kind of say good job. And, we talked about Kaz and kind of him switching from receiver to running back-ish. He got some carries at running back. And then I look at Dominique Hampton, and what they're doing with him and kind of the transition he's making and the support that they've given him. And I actually thought he came out of that looking pretty good and pretty confident playing linebacker for this team. So, again, it's trusting your staff. It's trusting the culture that you're building. And like you said, it's embodying that. It's embodying the support of it. Like you're not always, it's not always the stick. Sometimes it's the carrot. And I think it takes a special leader to understand when to do that. And I think Dan has that. And I think again he's empowered his staff and he's gathered a staff that also knows how to do that. So again, it's still early in the process, but I like those elements, and it's cool to see them show up in the preseason.
No doubt. All right. On the Thursday show, we will do a 53-man roster projection. That's going to be really, really interesting. Numbers are tight at a couple of spots. Some really interesting players to talk about. And we'll put our Adam Peters hat on and do our best on the Thursday show. So make sure you're subscribed if you're not already on YouTube. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you made it this far, you either are sadistic or you actually liked it. So it's you're just being honest. Just hit the button so that more people can find this podcast and check it out. Leave a comment if you like, and of course, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., subscribe, follow, whatever it is on your platform of choice. Until that Thursday show, see y'all on the radio 4 to 7 on the Team 980 for the Hoffman Show, and Logan, of course, doing everything over with the Commanders, the Command Center show. He's got podcasts, he's got digital shows. He does whatever Fred Smoot says. It's a good time. All right, that's it. That's all for this edition of Take Command. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching and listening. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.